It was just another Tuesday morning in the gym. The air smelled like fresh sweat disinfectant, and that faint, ever-present smell of rubber mats. And then she walked in. Sophia the Storm Jackson, a female black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with a reputation that had made more than a few seasoned fighters think twice before sparring with her. She wasn't the usual type. You know, the super serious, laser-focused fighter that you'd expect from someone with her skill level. No, Sophia was all smiles, laughter, and jokes. She didn't take herself too seriously, unless it was time to choke someone out. Sophia had just finished a tournament where she took home another shiny gold medal. But today, she wasn't interested in sparring with the pros. She wanted something different. So she did what anyone would do when they're looking for a challenge. She turned to Larry. Larry was, well, not your typical sparring partner. He was a janitor, in his 50s, and he wasn't exactly in peak fighting shape. But Larry had something that most people didn't: a quiet, unassuming demeanor and hands that could build anything from a broken mop to an entire fence. He didn't mind working late hours, and people were used to seeing him scrub toilets, mop floors, and do just about anything else to keep the gym clean. Most people never thought twice about him. But today things would change. Sophia, always with a grin, casually approached Larry while he was sweeping up some dust by the mats. "Hey, Larry, you think you could spar with me today?" she asked, nonchalantly flipping her hair. Larry paused. He looked at her, looked at the black belt wrapped around her waist, then back at the broom in his hand. "Come on, Larry. Just for fun," she prodded, throwing in that signature wink that could charm a rock out of its hiding spot. Now, Larry had seen a lot in his day. Trust me, the stuff you encounter as a janitor gives you an interesting perspective on life. But a black belt asking you to spar in front of a bunch of people? That was a first. He looked down at his faded hoodie and worn-out sneakers, then back up at Sophia. "I'm just here to clean, ma'am," he chuckled nervously, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I don't know if I'm built for sparring with you." Sophia's grin widened, and she wasn't about to back down. "Oh, come on, Larry. It'll be fun. You never know, you might surprise me." The rest of the gym had started to notice the banter. A few heads turned. A couple of fighters chuckled to themselves. But no one expected what would happen next. Sophia wasn't one to back down from a challenge. And sure, she had a black belt. She had won tournaments. She had crushed egos. But there was something about Larry's hesitation that made the challenge a little more enticing. Larry wasn't just some guy asking to spar. No, Larry was an enigma. The guy had never shown any interest in martial arts. And here he was, about to face off against the best female black belt in town. What happened next? Let's just say it left everyone speechless. Don't forget to subscribe to Black Untold Stories, because you won't believe what happens when an unlikely hero steps up and surprises everyone. Trust me, this one is a story you'll want to see unfold. The moment Larry stepped onto the mat, the whole gym fell silent. At first it was because no one really knew what was happening. They had been watching Sophia, their go-to BJJ champ, joke around with Larry. But now the scene was shifting. They were about to witness something they'd never seen before. Larry stood there, stretching his arms casually, looking at the mat like it was just another place to sweep. But this time, he wasn't holding a broom. He was standing face to face with one of the best fighters in the city. Sophia stood in front of him, her arms crossed. She was still grinning. She hadn't expected anything more than a quick laugh and maybe a tap out from Larry. "You ready?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Larry just nodded and casually cracked his neck. He took off his jacket, revealing a simple gray shirt and a pair of baggy jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing special. Sophia adjusted her posture. It was all muscle memory at this point. She wasn't worried, not one bit. She had trained for years. No way this guy, who barely worked out, could get the upper hand on her. Larry gave a small, almost imperceptible smirk. "Let's see what you've got, then." The first few seconds were almost too easy. Sophia came in fast as expected. A quick jab to Larry's side, a leg sweep to catch him off guard. But Larry was different than anyone she had fought before. Instead of stumbling back or defending in the usual way, Larry sidestepped her jab effortlessly. It was almost like he had been expecting it. The crowd gasped. Sophia blinked. What just happened? That wasn't supposed to happen. She threw another leg sweep. And again, Larry dodged it. This time, the gym was paying attention. People had stopped what they were doing. gathering at the edge of the mats, watching closely. Sophia couldn't help herself. She laughed. Okay, Larry, not bad. But she wasn't about to take it easy on him. She feinted a move to the left, then launched into a spinning kick aimed directly at his chest. Larry's eyes locked on her movements. He stepped back, but just enough to make her miss. He wasn't fast, but he was precise, like a clock ticking in rhythm. Now the crowd was starting to murmur. What was going on? Was Larry really dodging Sophia's strikes? Or was she just pulling her punches? Sophia took a step back, evaluating her opponent. She wasn't angry. She wasn't confused. She was intrigued. The adrenaline was starting to pump through her veins. She was no longer just sparring for fun. She was curious. Larry, on the other hand, was still calm. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't throwing wild punches or desperate kicks. He was taking his time. Sophia lunged forward again, but this time, Larry didn't move. Instead, he used his body weight to twist, catching her midair and flipping her clean onto the mat. The room froze. For a split second, no one made a sound. Sophia was on the floor, staring up at the gym ceiling. Larry was standing over her. His hands were in his pockets. He hadn't even broken a sweat. Sophia slowly sat up, her grin widening. She'd been thrown off guard, but she wasn't mad. Far from it. Okay, you're good, she said, laughing. She wiped the dirt off her shoulder and stood up. She didn't give him a second to catch his breath. She went straight into grapple, her hands wrapping around his torso, pulling him down to the mat with all her might. But Larry didn't budge. Instead of countering, he simply twisted his body, throwing her off balance. Once again, he was on top. But this time it was different. This time, he didn't let her get up. Sophia had no choice but to tap out. She was stuck, completely out of position. The room exploded, not just from surprise, but from respect. Larry, the janitor, the quiet, unassuming man, had just defeated Sophia, the Storm Jackson, in the gym's own home turf. And everyone had witnessed it. The moment Larry's victory sank in, the atmosphere of the gym shifted. At first, the room was filled with hushed murmurs. Then, those murmurs turned into laughter. Not mockery, but genuine amusement. And then, slowly, the realization hit. Larry wasn't some clumsy guy who had no business on the mat. He wasn't just a janitor. He was something else entirely. Sophia stood back for a moment, wiping sweat off her brow. She had spent years learning technique, precision, and muscle memory. She had fought at the highest levels, trained with the best in the world. And Larry, who had never set foot in a dojo, had just made her tap out with the simplest, most effortless moves. Larry, I have to know, where the hell did you learn that? Sophia asked, still panting but now genuinely curious. Larry smiled, but it wasn't cocky. It wasn't self-congratulatory. I learned it by watching, he said, shrugging, seeing the patterns, knowing when to move and when to wait. It was a simple answer. Too simple, really. But it was all that needed to be said. The gym went from disbelief to admiration. Fighters who had spent years perfecting their craft now looked at Larry with new eyes. And they didn't just respect him. They wanted to learn from him. Sophia, being the competitor she was, didn't take it personally. She grinned and extended her hand. You know what? She said, laughing. I'm not mad at you. You've earned my respect. I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. Larry shook her hand, still calm. I appreciate that, but you gotta know it's not about the belt. It's about knowing when to step back and when to step in. As the hours passed, Larry began teaching the fighters a different approach, one that wasn't based on fancy moves or brute strength. It was about timing and presence. It was about being aware of your surroundings and understanding the flow of a situation. Larry was surprisingly good at teaching. No one expected it, but the gym's atmosphere shifted again, this time into a place of growth. People stopped focusing on their egos. They stopped comparing themselves to each other. They started learning from Larry. At one point, a younger fighter named Jake, who had been training in BJJ for 3 years, came up to Larry, eager to ask a question. Larry, I'm still struggling with the positioning. I keep getting stuck in the same guard, and I can't get out. What's your advice? Larry thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes it's not about getting out of it. It's about making the position work for you. You don't have to escape. You just have to control the space. Jake blinked. That was different. The advice wasn't what he had expected, but it made sense. Larry's approach wasn't about brute force or complex techniques. It was about understanding where to apply pressure and when to release it. Later, Sophia and the other black belts sat together, watching Larry work with the gym members. "Do you think he's actually better than us?" one of the fighters asked. "It feels like he's teaching us more than we've ever been taught in years." Sophia didn't hesitate. "No, I don't think he's better. But I do think we're learning something we never considered. Maybe it's time we start looking at martial arts from a different angle." Sophia was right. Larry had opened their eyes to something they'd overlooked for so long. They'd been so focused on mastering the moves that they forgot about the subtlety that came with truly understanding the fight. It didn't take long for word to spread. The gym, once full of fighters with swollen egos and self-assured confidence, had started shifting. Their focus was no longer on who could submit, who the fastest, or who had the highest belt. No, now it was about understanding, the flow, and while the transformation was gradual, it became undeniable. Larry, the janitor who once spent his days mopping floors, was now the quiet mastermind behind the gym's newfound energy. He didn't bark orders. He didn't give speeches. But when he spoke, people listened. When he demonstrated, they mimicked. But there was still one thing left: the tournament. It was the annual gym tournament, an event that attracted talent from all over the city. Fighters from different disciplines, different gyms, all came to compete. The stakes were high, and the gym's pride was on the line. Sophia, of course, was the one everyone expected to win. But this year was different. Larry had been showing up more frequently, giving lessons between shifts. He wasn't officially a coach, but his influence was unmistakable. And for the first time in the gym's history, Larry was about to compete. The moment he announced it, the room went silent. Sophia couldn't help herself. "You're competing? Larry, come on." She laughed. But there was something else in her voice. Was it concern? Was it respect? Larry gave a slow nod. "Why not? What's the worst that could happen?" He wasn't cocky. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just genuinely wanted to be part of the challenge. Sophia, still skeptical, pulled him aside. "You know, it's different when it's a real fight. It's not just rolling around on the mats for fun. These people are hungry." Larry chuckled. "You keep saying that. But if I've learned anything from you, it's that it's not about how hungry you are. It's about how calm you stay when the pressure hits." As the tournament day arrived, the gym buzzed with excitement. Tension filled the air. Who would take the crown this year? It wasn't just the fighters who were nervous. The coaches, the spectators, and even the staff had a stake in this. There was a lot riding on this competition, and most people had already written Larry off as a joke. First up were the easy matches, the ones where everyone knew the outcome. Sophia made quick work of her first opponent, her submission technique flawless, as usual. The gym cheered, but there was something in Sophia's eyes. She wasn't just fighting to win anymore. She was fighting for respect. Fighting because Larry was here now. And Larry? He wasn't sweating. He wasn't nervous. His first match was against a newcomer, a younger, faster guy who had no idea what was about to hit him. Larry moved like he had all the time in the world. His every movement was fluid, every submission calculated with precision. The crowd didn't know what to make of it. Larry wasn't flashy. He didn't make a big show of his victory. But when he tapped the opponent out in under 3 minutes, there was a definite shift. Next came the harder fights. Sophia had advanced, and so had Larry. Now they were both facing off against some of the gym's toughest. Sophia's match was quick. Her opponent tried to use power, but she used his momentum against him, throwing him to the ground and locking in a chokehold before he had a chance to react. And Larry? Well, he was up next. And this time his opponent was someone who'd been at the gym longer than anyone else. A seasoned BJJ practitioner, one of the toughest guys there. He was fast, skilled, and arrogant. At first, it looked like Larry was out of his league. The younger fighter was quick to get a takedown and seemed to dominate the first few minutes. Larry didn't panic. He didn't fight back in a flurry. He did exactly what he had been teaching everyone else. He controlled the flow. Slowly, the younger fighter started to tire. Larry's calmness was like a weight on him. It wasn't just about technique anymore. It was about Larry knowing exactly when to shift his body, when to apply pressure, and when to back off. In the final moments, Larry locked in a submission. It wasn't the most dramatic or the flashiest, but it was effective. And when his opponent tapped out, there was no reaction from Larry, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had been done. The gym went dead silent. The crowd, the fighters, even the coaches, everyone had just witnessed something they would never forget. Larry wasn't just the janitor anymore. He wasn't just the quiet guy cleaning up after hours. He was a force in the gym now, and everyone knew it. The tournament finals were set. It was Larry versus Sophia, a matchup that had the entire gym buzzing with excitement, nerves, and maybe even a little disbelief. No one expected it. No one could have predicted that the janitor would have made it this far. But now it was Larry and Sophia, the two most unlikely competitors, standing face to face on the mat. Sophia had been the gym's champion for years. Her black belt wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a symbol of countless hours of sweat, practice, and dedication. But Larry? Larry was a man of mystery. He had come into their lives quietly, without fanfare, and with the kind of wisdom that you couldn't learn from books. He hadn't been trained in traditional martial arts, but somehow he'd found a way to outlast every fighter who challenged him. The gym was packed. Everyone had gathered around the mat to watch the spectacle. Fighters who had once looked down on Larry were now sitting on the edge of their seats, eager to see what he would do next. Sophia stood ready, focused, determined. Larry, on the other hand, was calm. He was almost too calm. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were relaxed. His gaze was unwavering. The bell rang. It was time. Sophia came at him like a storm. Her strikes were fast, calculated. She threw a few jabs, a leg sweep, trying to put him on the defensive. But Larry didn't flinch. He didn't dodge every hit, but he absorbed the pressure with remarkable composure. He flowed with it. He didn't try to overpower her. He didn't rush. For a moment, it seemed like Larry was just going to let Sophia tire herself out. And maybe that was part of it. But the moment she made a slight misstep, Larry was there. He grabbed her arm, twisted, and took her down to the mat with a move so smooth and effortless. It seemed like he was just guiding her. The crowd gasped. It wasn't the flashiest move. It wasn't the most technical. But it was effective. Sophia wasn't out. She wasn't done. She was too experienced for that. But Larry had caught her in a perfect position, and she knew it. She tapped out. The gym erupted, not just in surprise, but in respect. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a random accident. It was strategy. Larry stood up, extending a hand to Sophia, who was still on the mat, a little stunned, but smiling. She shook his hand firmly. "Okay, you got my respect, Larry. That was some next-level stuff." Larry simply nodded, his usual calm smile never leaving his face. It's not about power. It's about control. And with that, he walked off the mat. The crowd was still buzzing, but it wasn't about the victory. It was about what Larry had taught them. In one match, he had stripped away all the unnecessary noise and focused on the essence of what martial arts truly meant. Not brute force, not flashy moves, but calm, calculated presence. Later that evening, after the tournament had ended, the gym gathered for a small celebration. Larry was the star of the show, but not because he had won. It was because he had shown them something deeper, something they had been missing all along. Sophia took the microphone first. "I've been doing this for a long time," she started, addressing the crowd. "But what Larry did today, he taught me something I didn't even know I needed to learn. Larry's approach isn't about winning. It's about understanding. And it's about using your mind as much as your body. And for that, Larry are the real champion." The gym erupted in applause. And in that moment, it wasn't about Larry the janitor. It was about Larry the teacher, the unexpected master who had reshaped their entire approach to martial arts. As the night wore on, Larry quietly slipped out the back door. He wasn't looking for praise. He wasn't looking for attention. He was just happy to have shared what he knew. He had given everything he had to the gym, not as a competitor, but as a guide. And that, he realized, was his true victory. Now, you've seen the story of Larry, the janitor who turned out to be an unexpected champion. Want more stories of underdogs rising above the odds? Want to hear about the everyday people who redefine what it means to be a hero? Subscribe to Black Untold Stories and join the movement. where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.